Hey, hey, what is shaking, everybody? Welcome back to Surface Noise. You are on the B side. Chance is not here. He's got better things to do, but he will be back next Thursday. So hang with us. We got a great crew today. We're going to get into some fun stuff. A little bit of best or favorite record labels and why. Parlay that into current state of the record label. And we got some pros here today. I'm happy to say that I will be passing that on to them because they know much more than I about that. And then, yeah, we'll maybe talk about some fun or unusual labels as we kind of segue into the freestyle. So let me toss this up and then we will jump right in with introductions. That David Lee backbend, man, in that image. I don't know if you guys caught that. It's like you could pretzel himself, man, right on stage. All right. We got a great crew today. Let me just introduce them in order. Not that they need any introduction, but we got David from Safe and Sound, Texas Audio Excursion. What is up?
Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining. Jason, thanks for the invite.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Jason Rojas is here. What is up, Jason?
Thanks for inviting me on, Spence.
Sadvinyl.com. It's the mystery of sadvinyl.com is better than actually knowing what that is. That's why I haven't asked you about it yet.
If you go to it, you'll find out.
All right, I'll check it out. And then we got Stunty today. What's up, Stunty? How's it going, man?
It's good. It's good to be here.
Who are you? You're not representing anyone. We just got Stunty. We don't have any no affiliation today.
Yeah, usually I'm the water polo referee syndicate, but union. But no, that's fine. Like they didn't pay me off this month, so fuck them.
No sponsors today. Okay. All right, and then we got Arnaldo. What's up, Arnaldo? Good to see you again, my friend. You're muted. You're muted.
Yes, I wanted to avoid any background noise. Thanks for having me, Spence.
Of course.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
And Arnaldo hopefully will be occasionally giving us the thumbs up or the peace sign. So are you still? How's the new Mac coming along?
I don't want to overdo it.
Okay.
I don't want to overdo it. So
I only mentioned it because I do want you to sneak one in at some point.
I will.
But we'll keep it as sparse. All right. So today, I wanted to get into like labels. I thought that'd be a fun topic. And I thought something, we got a couple people with some expertise in that. And so we'll just kind of start off a little bit with just some of our favorites. You guys can tell us what your favorites are. And we'll just kind of go around, maybe show some records and talk about our favorite labels. Maybe it could be anything. It could be the fact that so many different great artists recorded for them or whatever the case might be. Like I said, we'll start with that. Anybody want to start off, or should I grease the skids and just kind of show a couple things?
I can go if you want.
Oh, cool.
Oh, come on, Jason. Respect your elders.
Okay. Mr. Spence can go. Stunty.
No, it's
How
David.
dare you? Just assume that I'm an elder.
Yeah.
No.
Elder statesman.
David, do you want to go first?
Well, mine was the one I was going to bring up the most was because Motown for me, because I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up near Chicago in Gary, Indiana. And of course, Motown was Detroit. Gary had a fairly heavy African-American population even at the time. The Jackson 5 came from Gary, Indiana, which I saw them when they were nobody in 1968 in a Sears and Roebuck parking lot playing music while they had the car from Goldfinger there, which was really a strange combination. But but for me, I mean, the creativity that came out of there, the saddest story about Motown is all the work the background musicians did. Can't remember their name exactly, but they had just like the California group had a name for the Wrecking Crew. They had a name, but they were poorly paid and did a lot of session work, obviously. But for me, the Four Tops, Supremes, and Jackson 5 were really my top bands or groups that I like the most. And Smokey Robinson, his writing, I think, was great. Obviously Stevie Wonder's there, but for me, I just, I remember Diana Ross came to Gary and to meet the Jacksons, and there was a big event. And so just has a lot of memories, for me. And now this year it became part of Interscope Capital label. So it's had a very interesting progression over the years in ownership and moving along with, obviously primarily, except for probably Rare Earth, African American groups. And I really like the groove of that music a lot.
Yeah, that's a good one. So much great stuff on Motown.
I'm in the midst of moving stuff, so I don't have anything to just show right now.
I was going to say, yeah, we don't have any visual aid. I didn't bring any Motown with me either. So, I mean, Jason, you got to have some Motown right there, right?
It's in this box if you really want me to go get it. Wasn't going to talk about that label.
Well, go ahead, Jay. What's on your mind?
So I want to talk about the Philips label, which they've had like a lot of great, I think since they started in the 40s or 50s. But I want to show some of my favorites.
And where did they start from?
Good question. I don't know, Stunty. Where did they
Of course,
start
the
from?
Netherlands. The Netherlands. It's
Netherlands,
a Dutch.
Denmark.
That's
yeah.
right. So in the Netherlands, they encompass so many music, right? Not only from their home country, but from the UK, Brazil, America, which I'm going to show. So this one, I believe, this is the Amazing Peddlers record. If you know this one, this was in excellent musicians at the time of the Beatles. They're probably way better than the Beatles, I'd say. This is their rock jazz opera called The Suite of London. A lot of people sample this for the drum breaks. I think this came out in 72. And it's got that kind of gold. Yeah, I know you can. Let's pull it out. Why not? So you can see it. Peddlers
Yeah,
Suite.
that's cool.
Very cool record. You don't see this that often anymore. Another great one that came out in 69 is the Gal Costa record. This Brazilian psych record is fantastic, on the Philips too. So, I mean, again, they were branching out to many other countries, right? Of course, the great Nina Simone, Wild is the Wind. Now, this record, jazz vocal, of course. But I think about this record, it's got like her emoting really hard. Great kind of front cover drawing of Nina Simone. And to just piss Stunty off, the great Vashti Bunyan. This is that folk record that everybody really, really wants on that Philips label, right? So if
That's
you
why
like
you're
that,
selling it.
what's up?
No.
Not for sale, definitely not for sale, right? So amazing record, Philips label. So that's all I got for this, right?
But you know that before being a record label, Philips was an electric company. They were actually
Electronic.
Yes.
Yeah. And what's funny is that they actually built a studio where they created electronic instruments that they didn't know really what they were going to be for. And they hired basically in-house. They put an ad like, who wants to do some music with these instruments? And two guys, here's the first on the Revue Technique Philips, Hank Baddings and G.W. De Bruyn, which he's more known under another name, Kid Baltan, I believe. It's Tom Disfeld, yeah. And this is some of the first commercialized electronic music that was actually popular. They did a cover of the Kwai River song, the whistling song. Doo-doo, doo-doo-doo-doo, doo-doo. And then they did an electronic version. But basically, it was basically engineers in Philips who were not musicians, who were like, oh, so do you want to do music? Yes. And they kind of like did some of the earliest electronic music records that were popular way before Wendy Carlos or Walter Carlos.
Huh. You just had that at the ready, or did you just pull that out when we were talking about Philips?
No, I just pulled that out. I was looking for another one, but this one fit the bill as well. So,
well, didn't Philips also, to go off the technology and electronics, they invented with Sony, the CD, right?
Yep.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
forget about that. Actually,
Well, they also did the cassette. Philips did the cassette in
Yeah.
1962.
So they were pretty much an innovator of the,
They were a huge
of the
innovator.
format.
Not to mention Mouth and McNeil, that great group on Philips from the Netherlands.
Were they associated with Magnavox? I don't know why. I feel like in my head, I'm thinking like when I used to hear Philips, it would be associated with Magnavox, but I
In the
might be wrong on that.
U.S.
Is that in the U.S.?
yeah,
All
I've
right.
never heard of the Magnavox. I don't even know what that is.
You're
It
better
must
off.
be an American thing.
I just feel like I used to hear Philips Magnavox when I was young. I
Yeah,
don't remember.
you did.
It's been
You did.
decades.
You did.
So I guess it's my
Well-
turn.
Yeah, go for it, Arnaldo.
All right. So I'm glad whoever started didn't start off with this label because I would have been really upset. 4AD.
Oh, nice.
One of my all-time favorite labels. Some of the artists on 4AD, obviously a British label, founded by Steve-O. Someone correct me if I am mistaken. And some of the artists on there, Dead Can Dance, probably one of the earlier signings. Associated initially.
Ivo, not Steve-O. Steve-O is the guys on
Oh, that's
MTV.
right. Yeah, that's I'm sorry. Steve-O is Soft Cell. Sorry. Evo Watts Russell, right? Stunty. So yeah, initially associated with the whole goth movement, Dead Can Dance. They moved away. On this album, they're a bit more. This is Ion, a bit more medieval inspired. They got into a little bit of like world music, Indian music. They evolved quite significantly from their beginnings. So who else was on there at the beginning? Cocteau Twins. Also,
That's a good one.
also a bit goth at the beginning. This one is my favorite Cocteau Twins album, Heaven or Las Vegas. And Victorialand came before that. Elizabeth Fraser, unintelligible lyrics, but it doesn't really matter because all you really need to listen to are her vocals, an amazing voice, and I don't know what else to say. Can we say that they were kind of like the godfathers at one point of dream pop and
Yeah.
shoegaze, right?
Yeah, sure.
They kind of came before all that movement.
That's a whole topic in itself, talking about vocals and sometimes how they just lend themselves musically to a song or a band without it. The vocals don't matter or the lyrics
Yeah,
don't
I mean,
matter.
I never really, when I listened to the Cocteau Twins, I really didn't even make any effort to understand what she was saying. Also, because a lot of the titles didn't really make sense, the titles of the song.
And how about understanding Dead Can Dance then?
Well, you could make out some words.
No,
Like-
because it's an invented language.
Which one are you referring to?
Dead Can Dance. The singer of Dead Can Dance. She sings.
Oh,
in
yeah,
her-
yeah, yeah. Even there's a lot of, like, I didn't put that one out. Into the Labyrinth has a lot of different titles that I don't even know what they mean. But yeah. So one more thing I wanted to add about 4AD is the reason why I love that label is because when you knew something was on 4AD, you knew what to expect. And I don't want to say it in a very predictable way, but you knew they had consistency in terms of what type of talent was signed to their label, apart from the amazing artwork on all of their albums, all curated by Vaughan Oliver, and company is 23 Envelope, some of the most beautiful album covers ever. So moving on, after let's say 90s, because those were kind of 80s bands. This is when they kind of really surprised me when they signed the Pixies, which they were going totally outside of what they were doing up until then. And I think Nick is on today, so Nick will probably.
They signed the Pixies in '87, though.
Yeah, Surfer Rosa. I was just referring to the first couple of artists that I was showing. They were more 80s based. Pixies continued well into the 90s, and they're really, I think was it 87 that Surfer Rosa came out?
Yeah, and the last Pixies album was released in '91, so they
Yeah.
are like they're the second half of. But you could say maybe it was the Breeders that were actually.
Yeah, we'll get to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Nirvana ripped off the Pixies.
I was gonna say the original Nirvana.
So the Pixies also gave birth to the Breeders.
I love Trompe Le Monde too. Sorry, not to break your, but Trompe Le Monde is so great,
Oh yeah.
man.
I didn't show Doolittle because I thought it would have been. I don't have an original of Doolittle, and showing the MoFi copy that I have on here kind of like would have sucked because I'm trying to stay true to the 4AD. And it gave birth to the Breeders. The Breeders, I want to say probably their most commercially successful group in the United States. I think wasn't Cannonball like a hit in all the alternative and the whole college scene? That was a very popular song at the time.
You know, there's controversy about that song, right?
No, do tell.
What's his name from Pavement? Who's the guy from Pavement? Stephen Malcolm. He said he complained that Cannonball should not have been a hit. Like Cut Your Hair by Pavement should have been a hit. And then Kim Deal was like,
but he was being facetious, Jason.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. Back then, yeah.
No, I mean, he said it recently. He brought it up. And then Kim Deal was like, your song sucks. You know, let's just face it. Pavement sucks. That's what she was like implying. It was painful.
And the great thing is that 4AD is still signing amazing artists. I don't have the record that everyone's talking about. I really just can't get into it yet. Adrienne Lincoln, is that the name? Kind of folky. She's got the cowboy hat on. I've been trying really hard to like it and listen to it a couple times. I just find it a little too depressing. But yeah, they also have The National on, sorry, backwards. This time, the National American Band, right? They're based out of Brooklyn. So 4AD, for me, still continues to sign very relevant artists. Although,
except that it's not the same label anymore.
No, it's not. It's
owned by Beggars.
It's Beggars. Beggars Banquet is the largest indie distributor.
So the guy, Ivo, he died. The guy who does the Von, I think I'm not sure.
Von Oliver, he died a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of, like, if you see the current Pixies artwork, even though they're now on BMG, it's still very much in theme to capture the whole 23 envelope. Thank you, son. Had you picked 4AD as well?
No.
Oh, okay. You just have them handy.
Oh man, see.
Look at that.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Is that your now spinning list?
No, I was talking about there's fairly often reasons to talk about the Pixies, so they are around.
I'm surprised you didn't talk about these guys.
Because that's not on 4AD.
These aren't. No, these I know. I don't have one here. But they did in the flat field, right? The first one, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it on?
Am I
4AD?
wrong on that? I'm looking on the website. I wanted to double check it. It's the one that comes up on the 4AD website, but I don't know if that was. I don't know the relationship between Beggars Banquet and 4AD. You guys probably know
Beggars
better than
me. Beggars Banquet owns 4AD now.
Yeah, and Beggars Banquet was originally an indie label that then at one point was bought by Warner, I think, and then they rebought their independency, but basically it was someone buying the brand, and they were smart, and it's a business. They bought like indie labels that had run their course, and yeah, doesn't mean they can't do anything good, but yeah.
And I think at one point some of the artists on 4AD were distributed by Beggars at the time, if they weren't picked up by like I think the Pixies were on Elektra in the US, but I think some minor 4AD artists were distributed at the time by Beggars.
Cool. Thanks, Arnaldo. That was a good one, man. 4AD is such a great label. All right,
And now we
Stunty.
know also that in the beginning, Arnaldo was a little bit goth.
No, I was never goth. I was never goth.
You're not goth now,
No.
Arnaldo? I thought you were.
I own a lot of black clothing, but I am not goth.
So I think I've done videos about it. Like my favorite labels. Like I wish I wouldn't talk about only one, but like, okay, it's like that. Its label started in 1948, and that still kind of exists, but basically ended in 1987. So almost 40-year run. That's pretty good. Started by a New York Jewish guy called Moses H. And it's the great Folkways label. And as every great label, as Arnaldo highlighted, it's a combination of music direction and artwork. This is a jazz record on Folkways, and uncharacteristically, this is one of the few that doesn't have the traditional artwork of Folkways, since they all have normally this one doesn't have it either. So yeah, they have folded on one side the artwork that starts on this side, which this design has been reprised by many labels as the classic design by Ronald Klein, if I'm not mistaken, the guy who did the artwork. And they have like something like 2,500 releases. It's probably the most important fully indie label in America, and one of the biggest labels for independent labels. And they had, as their name says it all, it was like basically giving a glimpse on all folk music from around the world. And the folk music could be the music of like an Indian tribe doing their peyote rituals. It could be also the sound of frogs in the Amazonian jungle. Could be the competition, a pie competition in Berkeley. It could be electronic music from Iran, could be electroacoustic music from Israel, because all these music were new when they were releasing this. So it was the new traditions as well. So it was interesting to see a label that was about traditional music, but all sorts of traditions, including the most forward-thinking ones, the new ones, the ones that may not become tradition, but that were doing something. And yeah, that label has been highly inspiring for me. I have probably around 120 releases on that label. I don't need to have all of them because I don't have room for all of them. There's so many, but it's just one of the labels from the past that I think is absolutely paving the way for so much. Now they are part of the Smithsonian. And some of the releases have been reissued on vinyl in the past few years, and sometimes they even release something new. But yeah, Folkways.
Folkways, cool. How easy is it to come by their stuff, Stunty, like in the US?
I would say most of their releases are fairly easy. Like I showed some more esoteric ones apart from that folk one. This is like you probably can find this almost brand new for about $10. Doesn't mean that it's super easy to find. Oh no, actually this one, yeah, this one is not even on Folkways. It's on Arhuli, which was Moses H. Best friend, and who the label was distributed by Folkways. And they kind of stole the whole aesthetic, and also were doing the same thing as Folkways, except it was more focused on blues, folk, bluegrass and stuff like that. But it's essentially the same label, or a sub label in a way you could say. But yeah, most of these records, world music. Let's see if I have some here. Well, there will. Yeah, most of them in the US. I'm sure a lot of people here will agree. You see them in the shops, and they're not necessarily the most looked upon, because a lot of it is like global music, as we now say, global sounds, like the proper word for like ethnomusicology recordings, like world music. But yeah, it's nice to have a label, or it's not just nice, it's absolutely mind-blowing to have a label that really doesn't really make any hierarchy between time, place, space, that was as interested in avant-garde electronic music, free jazz, and music from Papua New Guinea and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And you said they're reissuing now. Is the label still live?
Well, of course not, but like they're part of the Smithsonian. So the Smithsonian's one of their missions is to keep that catalog alive, and to basically make it flourish. It is one of the considered by the Library of Congress of one of the greatest achievement by phonographic enterprise, and rightfully so, in my opinion. There's a lot of even like protest song folk singers from the 60s that were released also on Folkways.
Cool. Thank you, Stunty. Does that mean it's my turn? Because I'm glad you guys all went deep. I'm glad everyone came up with some great labels, because I got the obvious ones, the ones that everyone has seen and heard before. But I mean, I just went by the stuff that I'm listening to most and grew up with. And so my shootout really came between Capitol and Warner. And Warner's, the labels that were under Warner. And of course, and also records that got sort of special printed labels as well on the records. Of course, Warner, Grateful Dead's one of the obvious ones. And they got the... I like when some of the record labels do something different, like a lot like Columbia, Warner, Capitol sort of had their generic labels for everyone, but occasionally they would print sort of a special label for a record or a band, and so I thought that was cool. And then Reprise, of course, under Warner, and with Reprise we get Jimmy. So because we got the Dead, we got Jimmy on Reprise, or is it Reprise? I'm not sure how you say it. I think it's Reprise. That's what I say. And then Zappa, part of the reason I had to pick Warner's because then you get Zappa's, his early catalog. His earliest stuff is on Verve, obviously, but then after that,
Discreet.
And Discreet and Bizarre, which were on the actual Warner labels that came out under Warner. And so like these Bizarre records have these like really elaborate sort of icon where you get Reprise, you get Bizarre, and then you get the Warner as well. So, and I think some of the covers even have all three. So kind of interesting how complex the labels got with those. But yeah, so I mean, just for those three alone, and if this isn't a desert island video or a topic or anything, but I mean, when I start kind of thinking about it that way, it's like Jimmy, Zappa, The Dead, like that pretty good label. Although probably they all hated at some point working for Warner, I've heard. Or
that's the thing, though. It's like the label that Arnaldo was showing, like these artists are associated with the label, whether you want it or not. Whereas most artists on Warner could have been anywhere else. It wouldn't have mattered that much on their music.
Sure.
In my opinion.
And like you said, whether they wanted to or not, right? But at the same time, we got what we got. I mean, they all came out on either Warner or some sister label or whatever you want to call it. And the other one that I thought, and I went ahead and picked two because it's kind of it's tough for me because then you also got Capitol. That, of course, with Capitol, you get a lot of the Frank Sinatra stuff. Of course, the Beatles, U.S. stuff, which, again, you could debate whether that's good or not, good or bad. And then the Beach Boys as well. So and all the various incarnations of the Capitol label. So, yeah, anyway, I mean, I think it'd just be, you know, whether I still love some of the more, I don't know if esoteric's the right word, but the stuff that's not as common or popular or as massive as, you know, like the 4ADs and the different things we talked about. But again, if it was a desert island thing, it would be a shootout between Capitol and Warner, I think. Like, for better or worse, just because of the great albums that they did put out. And that is all I got for that. So it didn't take long. I know those are obvious picks, but I appreciate everyone's picks on those. And part of the reason I thought it'd be fun to kind of show our favorites and show some of our favorite records on the labels, but also what I want to do now is parlay this into kind of the current situation with labels, because even with the labels and some of the complexities that we've had over the decades with different labels, acquiring other labels, or, you know, we talked about with Beggar's Banquet and 4AD and different with Warner and Reprise and all that stuff. It seems like even now, if it's not more convoluted, it's even more, what's the word? More labels have been gobbled up by labels, massive labels, right? Like UMG, Sony are some of the big ones. And the other thing too, I kind of maybe want to get into, and maybe David or you know, anybody, it's up for anyone, obviously, but I know David and Stunty are in the industry, is to sort of get into, when we think about records now, oftentimes, even more so now, I think, than back in the day, we think of like acoustic sounds, we think of OJC, we think of Vinyl Me Please and stuff like this. And so I kind of wanted to get into the relationship with the current labels and how we sort of think about them. You know, how has it kind of changed the way our relationship with records? And I think people are talking more about acoustic sounds than we do about the actual labels that put these records out. So I don't know who wants to jump in first on that, but David, I was kind of thinking this is maybe right up your alley.
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of the labels, the big box labels, the Sonys, the UMGs, you know, I think one thing generally, I'm always a little skeptical about what they put out now. Between the digital piece and the quality of the vinyl, you know, I just believe that they obviously are going at it, you know, from obviously a mass marketing business perspective, and that's fine for probably 95% of the people, honestly. So I don't begrudge the fact that that's the method. I honestly don't like the fact that so many small labels have gotten gobbled up, because I think it makes it harder for artists to get you know their stuff into the marketplace. But as an audiophile, you know, generally, and again, it's not 100%, but by and large, you know, you're probably going to be getting something that isn't as sonically promising as some of the second tier, as I would call them, reissue labels, which are really about quality and about trying to get the most out of it rather than just mass production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because my way of thinking, at least, and you're closer to this than I am, is it almost feels like a monopoly, right? It's sort of like,
yeah, it is.
You just have a couple of big boys now.
It is. And if you look at it, and this is a great, I think, connection, there's a real strong tie-in between Sony and MoFi, for example. They're tied into them from an electronic standpoint, from the DSD. They've been using some of their digital stuff for decades. And so there's a tie-in there. And so why do a lot of releases from Mobile Fidelity align to Sony label? I think they have an inside track there to a certain degree.
How does that affect the consumer? Does it matter to the consumer, or?
Well, it affects availability and what's going to be out there and what they're going to choose to do through which channel. That's part of it, I think. And if Sony knows that MoFi produces a really good product, like let's say a Braxis, and now they're coming out again with it on 2x45, and obviously Sony's reissued it several times as well. They just keep taking a bite at that same apple to generate revenue.
Interesting.
Why not?
And with so few people kind of in the game controlling all of that stuff too, right? Like all the records that we buy, the pressings, and
Yes.
what about? And I know you have some, and I'll pass it around to everybody. But just one more thing, I'm curious to know from
Yeah.
you is how is it with say an acoustic sounds or something like that? What is their relationship? Because I feel like the consumer is. Uh, that's where they're acquiring a lot of their records, right? Regardless of
Yeah.
labels. So how is it? What's their kind of relationship to the big
Well,
labels?
let me relate. I only do this because of the context of the conversation. But when I talked to Kai Siemens, who runs Speaker's Corner, about a year and a half ago, he was outlining how difficult it is for him to get any new license, period.
Mm.
And I have been in contact with him for those 18 months, and he has not been able to get a new license since. So, that whole arena is drying up. So when Chad is able to do something, as an example, in acoustic sounds, get a Steely Dan or a Bob Marley, those are because of some really well established, the Atlantic 75 relationships that have been developed over time.
Mm.
Those take time, and I'm talking years and years for that to come to fruition. So it's no small feat in certain scopes of music. Maybe it's easier in the jazz industry with maybe people who passed away and you're just dealing with their legacy and their family. But these other ones are pretty difficult to bring to market. And so it's hard, I think, sometimes to get an appreciation for that.
Do you have any idea about why that is? You would think that, especially now that vinyl has legs, for the last decade or two, why are they so reluctant to have this stuff put out?
Why share the profits when you can own the profits? Why have a second?
Okay.
That's part of it. And then there's also artists. Some of the artists aren't, willing. Let's talk Led Zeppelin, right? Anything from them is going to have to go through Jimmy Page. So, he believes what he put out was the best it can ever be. So that may not happen until Jimmy's playing guitar somewhere else. I don't know. But I'm just trying to say that it's not as easy as snapping your fingers to get these connections. And the labels, although they're in it to make money, they also want to monopolize things a bit too, because they can snap a finger and get that released. They don't usually have, unless the artist is reticent to do it or has a legal right to it. It's their a la carte. They're not as concerned about how much can get out there in mass. They're more concerned how much can they get out there in mass, and if there's something that could be branded better for this third party to do, then they'll consider that. Especially if there's a huge bogey of dollars in it for the artist, like Steely Dan was.
Gotcha. This is such an interesting topic. Do you know?
Yep.
Do you have any inside scoop on like what about releases for like box stores and stuff like that for like the Walmarts and the Targets? I mean, does that go directly through the labels or how does that work? Do you know?
Well, Arnaldo may know more about this, but I know a lot of these, when you look at the dead wax, it's the same as, the other plates that are used. I just think they decide. I mean, look at the Tears for Fears thing that came out today, which is my background. They're releasing a live. You go on and look on Tears for Fears site, and they're releasing it through STE in the UK. They've got a Target one, they got a Walmart one, they got a US only. It's kind of a, just spraying the product out through various channels. And that's the recognition of how much vinyl is present in the market. That example to me.
Interesting. And I'm guessing they probably get pressed at different plants even, right? Depending on where it's
Well, a
going to
lot of
be.
these have worldwide releases, and they just do one and then they allocate across. Or they'll have GZ do it in Europe, and then their sister company in Canada do the North America, South America.
Interesting.
Arnaldo, you probably know a bit about this as well, I would assume, in your work.
Well, yeah. When it comes to catalog, because we see, for example, Walmart has all those catalog.
Arnaldo, tell us where you were. I didn't realize you were associated somehow.
Yeah, I
For
work
people
at
that don't know.
BMG.
Sorry, say it again.
I work at BMG.
Oh,
and
really? Okay.
A lot of the catalog, like you'll find Metallica, you'll find what other variants were very popular? The Eagles, all these very popular, let's call them staples. Those are always going to be present, and it's just a matter of how do I say this? It depends on what really the buyers from Walmart or from Target are really interested in. They're always going to be interested in those staples, so they'll always be ready to take an exclusive color variant, right?
Mm.
And going back to what David was saying, yes, some variants are handled by different plants, depending on where the market for that. So, for example, they may be produced in the United States at GZ or Precision plant in the United States and then sent over to Walmart because probably Walmart has that only one. Other times that variant may be exclusive, say for example, to Barnes and Noble in the US and maybe to some other retailer in the UK or in Europe. And in that case, they'll probably be just one production plant. Although probably the stickers will vary, the hype stickers will vary depending on where they're allocated to. But going back to what David was saying with regards to the labels, there are some instances though where major labels don't have enough people to focus, because that's how vast their catalog is, especially if you look at Universal, Warner, and Sony. They don't have enough people to curate every single release the way it should be handled. And that's why sometimes they prefer to just license it out and have another reissued label do it. So for example, BMG recently licensed in some releases from Warner, from Rhino, because even though they still hold the Rhino logo, there's also a BMG logo because we produce and we distribute it. And it's because the bandwidth of the staff at Rhino can't focus on every single catalog. So you'll see that often that labels will outsource to another, either smaller, I mean, BMG is no longer small, but there are some cases where they will license it out to a smaller label because they just don't have the bandwidth to curate the releases or the catalog.
Gotcha. Can you guys hear me? I can't tell if I'm muted. Yep. Okay. Is that something where if there is that a case where if there was more labels, I guess, or they weren't spread so thin that maybe more care would go into these pressings? Do you think that being that there are three big boys in the game and obviously a lot of smaller ones, but three big fish out there that are trying to get all these in control of this? I mean, does that have something to do with the quality of what goes out, or?
That's a very myopic way of looking at it. 98% of all releases are not coming from these three big conglomerates. The vast majority of releases are small numbers, small independent labels. And I think we're kind of like mixing up two things that are vastly different from many different standpoints. Like reissue labels are not really record labels. And like the big twos, they're distributors. They have board catalogs like IPs, and then they find ways to make money out of it with, as Arnaldo rightfully said, like the only variable is how many people they have to work on these things. But they're basically account people in many ways, which is fine. But like a record label, the way we mostly think of it, is a label that nurture artists, promotes them, sometimes reissue them if in their own catalog. But the business model of a reissue label that is reissuing like stable names, it's there's not really anything artistic about it. In the drive is a business drive, which is fine, but in the end you can even see in the laws and the ways, I'm sure Arnaldo is aware of all of that, I'm sure he works with that, like you can get in most countries help from the state to finance products And if it's about new artists or if it's reissues, archival material, it's completely different department that you will deal with, completely
Mm.
different set of rules. And it's
Yep.
actually quite depressing because it's much easier to get money to help your label for release if it's archival or old stuff that is patrimonial, rather than new artists who are actually shaping the future, who are actually defining the zeitgeist or not.
So on that note, can you talk a little bit about what's the difference between like a blue note, for example, and say an acoustic sounds? Is there, because what you're describing in terms of like what
Blue Note
role each one is
releases
playing.
original music. Acoustic Sounds doesn't, or so rarely so.
Acoustic Sounds does. Analog Productions does, but not. Yeah, Acoustic Sounds is just selling.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I guess I meant Analog Productions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Stunty, I mean, do you? Because I think this is really great stuff. I think people are interested in this. You know, like a Blue Note is the label, and they're producing their own records, right? In the sense that they're having them pressed and they're in control of it. In an Analog Production situation, it's different, right?
It's a business.
They're all business.
Well, yeah.
Well, originally, but there's like now that Don Was is helming Blue Note, it's run in a business sense because like the president of Blue Note doesn't own a Blue Note. It's not the same as the guy who runs Warp Records, who he founded in 1989, and he still owns it 35 years after it. He is reissuing this year, Aphex Twin Select and Ambient Works Volume 2, 30 anniversary year. It's going to be one of the biggest releases of the fall. And they still own that catalog. Of course, they share it with the artists. But when they reissue like Boards of Canada, it's their own catalog. But they put out the new albums from them. They put out new artists. They're doing stuff. And the guy who's doing that owns the label. He founded it and he owns it. So it's a very different motivation, very different pride. Of course, there is business, and it's a very successful business for them. I would argue that Warp is probably the most successful independent label still in existence. They've been around.
I love Warp, by the way. I could have put them on my favorites list now that you mentioned it.
They have. I looked up. They have like something like 1,100 releases, original releases: hip hop, rock, ambient, electronic music, techno, world music, jazz. They cover everything. They even do. They have a touring agency, Little Big, which is the biggest independent touring agency in the world, that don't even have only Warp artists, by the way. They have a film production. It's basically like there was a time when we would say, looking at the 80s, 480 is like the defining label of that decade. Before, like in the 70s, you had labels like Virgin or Island, who then became like conglomerates and kind of got like sucked into something that they kind of lost their own identity in. Warp is one of these very few examples that have managed to not just survive but thrive and define like the trends of the zeitgeist of modern pop culture. And so they still have this kind of mission that, like, I'm not gonna like bullshit and say that it's not kumbaya and it's like, oh, they do it for the art only. The guys who run it, they had a record store in the late 80s, and they saw, oh, techno is coming, let's do that.
Well, isn't that how Rough Trade started?
Yeah,
they were
Rough
just a
Trade is
store.
exactly the same. Most record label start either from an artist or from a record store. It's like, but when you get that much business behind it, like, are we really talking about the same thing? Yeah, it's called record label, but it's in so many ways a completely different economic model. Wouldn't you agree, Arnaldo?
Yeah, well, also going back to these reissue labels, have less risk
Yeah.
than the actual record label, because they
Oh, yeah.
they really don't have the signing, let's call it signing overhead, where they have to pour in
Big bucks.
incredible amounts of money into
Seed
either
money.
developing an artist, right?
Yeah.
Or signing the artist, because you're stealing him or her or the band from another label, right?
From any other label, yeah.
And whereas these reissue labels, yes, the licenses are pretty hefty. They may be able to inch out a 20%, an 80-20 deal where they keep 20 and the rest of it goes to the label, the major label. But they have also a lot less risk. They can shop around for the records that they think will sell, that have been out of print, that are on high demand. So it's a much less riskier business. For
And
the
you talk about right now, like you mentioned the hefty licensing cost, but there are so many reissue labels that actually are looking or dealing with niche music where there's
that's different.
barely anything.
Oh, yeah.
That's
These
different.
labels are the most lucrative because, like, we have John Bebop here. Like, do you think that like labels that do reissues of these obscure 7 inches from the 60s?
Yeah, no,
70s,
that's totally different. We're talking
Yeah,
about
totally different market.
your analog
Yeah.
productions that's licensing.
But I'm just saying that there are also labels that are specialized in reissuing, and that because they go into niche and they are good at it, it's extremely lucrative for them, and they actually maybe do also a service in to uncover forgotten music or somewhat forgotten music. In France, we have a label called Born Bad that has been doing incredible compilations. In the UK, you have Soul Jazz, which has been doing exactly the same for post-punk, dub, disco, and stuff like that. And like in these fields, usually it's rare that the licensing fees are high. Also, that means that sometimes you could, if the project is very successful, often the artists, after a little while, they realize, oh, we've been taken advantage a little bit of. Because it's easier when the money is smaller. It's even more easy to take advantage of the artist if you come from their perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do see a lot of the smaller labels are getting there's more volume being pressed out of those labels than out of the big ones, even the ones that, like I said, are selling in the box stores and stuff
I'm
like
saying
that.
that for an Adele record that they press 500,000, there will be 5,000 labels who put out 4, 5, 6 releases a year, between 300 and 500 copies. So in the end, that's way more.
Okay. What about anyone who didn't? Jason, do you have any comments on this at all, or?
Nope.
You're about to put out the record, Jason.
I know you're
I mean,
an artist yourself.
I have way more questions than comments.
I don't know if my record will be reissued. I'm not sure. Not sure.
Show your record? You must have one handy.
Oh, and I think it's downstairs, not here.
Oh man.
I have the test press that shouldn't have come out, but it's out there.
When did this come out?
Of the upcoming or of the upcoming one?
No.
Oh,
not
the
yet.
previous.
Previous. I don't even know how I was able to get it, and I'm kind of like disturbed by it. So when I brought it up during our band reunion, there was some like uneasiness. Like,
Oh,
where did you
wow.
get that?
No, don't tell me you have the only test pressing.
No, I think there's
Oh.
a couple. I think there's
Oh,
like
okay.
10 or 20, but I don't know. Like, I was like, well, how did this get out there? And the two guys were sort of like looking down, like it shouldn't have.
A
ever.
leak.
Yeah,
They leaked it.
that's right.
You see, like Russell here, he's mentioning Numero Group as a great reissue label. They're a label that basically their mission is kind of, at first, to put out music that is great, but it was not the right time for it to be accepted by a wider audience. It doesn't mean they have like a huge audience, but still much wider potentially than when these records were put out back then. Even if they had success back then, it was in an even smaller niche. And that's been their model. And I think the fact that they're thriving means it's a good business as well. You just have to have someone with a good ear and a good understanding of zeitgeist, of the current zeitgeist, to do that. And not everyone can do that. So kudos to them.
And you like Numero also scored really big when they licensed. I believe they licensed because they manufactured it and created it. The Blondie box set.
That was very different. That was the blip in a way in there. Like that was okay. Now let's make some money because that's and I think it was an experiment in a way.
Yeah, that's the first like big name artist that they ever associated with.
Yeah, you could say
That was,
that
it was a very high profile release.
Mm.
Let's just say this, right?
Mm.
So how does like Numero and these other ones you're talking about? Sorry, I'm not that familiar with, but how are they getting distribution? How are they selling their record? You're getting pressed, but
record stores.
Just right in the record store. Okay, so this isn't something that you would see on Acoustic Sounds, right? I mean, is there a relationship? And I'm sorry, I just think this is interesting stuff, and hopefully there are people out there as naive as me about some of this, but Acoustic Sounds is distributing, they're making deals directly, and probably David, you know better, with the labels, right? It's not as if somebody on an independent label could say, hey, can I sell my record in your shop or something?
Well, there's always a third party distributor.
Yeah.
In whether it's Universal's distribution chain or Beggars or ADA or Sony's distribution chain, there's always going to be a big boy that's delivering worldwide or even locally to the smaller indie shops, because there's probably actually two hands that are going by. It's going first to the larger distributor and then to the local distributor, because a lot of indie stores don't buy directly from the major distributor because they don't have that volume like Target or Walmart would. So there's usually two hands that go that have to pass through the product.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Most independent labels are best served by using several distributors. Don't have like any exclusivity. It makes no sense. And nowadays, even for bigger labels, I would assume, like, actually, I'm curious to hear what you think, Arnaldo. I don't think anyone is served by having exclusivity with one distributor anymore. Like,
well, you actually want to like it at least it helps in terms of negotiating a deal, promising the distributor that all of our titles are going
Arnaldo, also, there's something we forgot to say, that like right now we're talking about vinyl records. Like a music label is releasing music, not vinyl records. Whatever the format that is popular at the time or what they choose.
Right.
So
right.
A vinyl reissue label is operating from a different perspective as well in that regard. So because with vinyl records, you need to distribute them physically. When you are a label that is releasing new music, you're releasing it in all possible mediums you can.
Right.
I will tell you from my experience, even though BMG is very well funded, the investment and the knowledge behind distributing even digitally to Spotify, Apple, and YouTube is immense. You would think that it's very easy. It's not easy because there's so much metadata involved in distributing directly to these DSPs that even though you can call yourself a small indie label, you're probably distributing both the digital and the physical through a third-party distributor.
I have a good example. My Friday night or my Friday live streams where I play music from start to end, I play some very obscure music, and like I'm never gonna be able to monetize my channel because I play music, and the stuff that the YouTube algorithm recognizes is baffling.
Right.
So, and the way that happens is because there are people who are working to inventory, catalog all these things digitally in many different ways. So to think about the amount of time, energy, money, and means to do that, releasing vinyl records, it's like no one can, like, that's nothing. That's
Yeah, I
nothing.
mean, going back to the YouTube, because you have not only the owner of the master recording
Hmm.
that YouTube is checking for, you also have the owner of the copyright of the composition, which is also registered.
Hmm.
That I have posted videos of live songs, and it doesn't get monetized. Not because that live performance is pretty much unique, right? Every time that I don't know, any artist performs a song live, it's never going to get matched unless there's another video out there of that same performance on that same night. There'll never be the same performance, exactly the same, like sonically speaking, as when you like put out a record, right? If you're using someone else's recorded music as it appears on a record, it's much more easy. It's much easier to be detected by the tool. But the live track gets dinged because the publisher steps in, and they recognize that composition, even though it's being sung. It could be even a cover version, not by the original artist.
Yeah,
So
because there's one thing that we rarely talk about also in the VC, it's the publishing companies, which are often completely disconnected from the labels,
totally, yeah.
disconnected from the artists. You basically, artists, when they start to copyright their music, suddenly they're in the system, and then the
Absolutely,
machine
yeah.
works for them whether they know it or don't. That's how it happens.
Exactly. Well, I have to say, thank God, right? Because so many writers and artists would not be compensated properly if there wasn't some kind of police. You know, everyone points the finger at the label. Oh, the label blocked me. No, it could be the publisher that's also looking at the interest
It's the
of the
publisher.
writer of that song. Forget about
Yeah.
Taylor Swift. What about Jack Antonoff? He's owed money, right?
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, it's easy, especially like if talking of you. We had this discussion on another Surface Noise where we talked about that being blocked on YouTube as just a little person either spinning records as Jason has done or using it as background to your video and getting caught up in all that stuff and being blocked and demonetized and everything. That's another interesting discussion. But to your point, Arnaldo, it's like obviously, I mean, that is important that there are groups in there that are taking care of that stuff. Just sometimes it sucks when you're
Because
I'm not.
unfortunately, we've come to the point where many people don't appreciate the value of music because it's so easy to get.
Everything should be free.
I remember where I had to save up in the 80s when I was growing up, or even in the 70s when I was buying Kiss records. I would save up my allowance because the only way I could own that music is if I had a physical copy.
Exactly.
Or I borrowed it from a friend. And remember back then, the wars on illegal taping, right? That was the very first war that the music industry waged against, piracy, was, people copying onto cassettes, making mixtapes, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
But
well, we can continue this discussion.
About your discussion, Jason. I think that's one of the reasons I thought that this discussion could be interesting, because I think it's healthy to kind of like.
Oh, you finally think we had a good topic? I mean, geez, Stunty, thanks, man.
You had a lot.
I think it's a topic that needs more clarification than others. Like, what is a record label? Because we tend to put under, it's almost like a tentpole term in a way, because in reality, I've run a label. I released something like 40 vinyl records. For the longest time, we decided with my partner we were not going to put anything digitally. And yet, like, dozens and dozens of people were doing their own videos of our tracks and putting them on YouTube and benefiting from that. So, like, now we live in in an ecosystem where it's very difficult to have control of what you're doing independently. So you have to rely on other actors. Like these publishing companies, yeah, sure. Arnaldo was saying, "Oh, thank God for them, for the artists." But like, how, like when an independent artist just releases an album privately, and suddenly I could get a copyright claim because of a publishing company he has signed with that he has almost forgotten about and that he's never going to see a dime from because of many things. He could eventually. There's the potential of that happening, but the reality is a little bit different, unfortunately.
Well, for that, a lot of people say Spotify and all these streaming platforms for
Or the
certain
devil.
for no, but for some, it is actually great. It's a great opportunity to sample a record and be exposed to a record that you wouldn't normally be exposed to because not that many people may know that obscure artist, right? That is trying to make it in the music business and just uploaded their song onto YouTube, right? There's good and bad, right? That's why, you know,
If you're a band that's struggling with distribution, yeah, it seems to me like you would just want it to be out
but you could
anywhere
also
and everywhere.
you could also look at it on the other way. Now people are instead of going out and buying that obscure artist's record, they're just streaming it and they're happy with it, right? You could look at it both ways. They may not, at least they're streaming it legally, right? And yes, it's fractions of a penny, but it's still headed towards the artist.
It's interesting. Arnaldo is in a kind of interesting position as he works in a way for one of these lesser evils or straight up evils in a way, and he's also a music lover in the sense that like he knows that like a company like Sony BMG, or it's not Sony anymore, right? BMG.
No, there's Sony and then there's
Yeah.
BMG.
But like I think whatever you think about them, but if you guys remember, like I think it was around 2010, the big Radiohead thing with Spotify and all these things. I think we haven't yet really understood the lesson from that, because in the end, even if they still have control about what they were doing, they totally lost this battle, because it was about informing people, making people understand their own buying habits and choices, and like people are not interested in learning these kind of things, it seems, or back then it seemed, because that they are the band with the biggest reach and audience back then that attempted to do that in a significant way, where they offered on their own download platform that they created, you pay whatever you want for this.
Right. I remember I paid $1 for that.
You cheap bastard.
because you know why? Because they released it towards the end of the year. Pay whatever you want. I knew I was going to buy the vinyl when it came out, so I didn't feel bad just paying $1 for it, because I then bought the physical release when it came out. So there were a couple of interesting questions that were in the comments. For example, Russell's, I don't know how to put it up. Russell S.
The last one by
I
Russell.
don't think you
No.
can.
The one about the parent companies.
That one, yeah. Do the
It
parent
depends.
companies often allow subsidiary
Sometimes.
label act
It depends.
independently
I can
as
tell
secured
you,
in niche labels?
I could
Sorry.
tell you that.
I was trying to read it out loud for people that are going to
Yeah, I'm
listen to
sorry.
the
Oh, sorry.
podcast.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It depends how controlling the parent company is,
And
how
good
tight
that-
they hold the reins and to the purse. It depends, because remember, they're in the business to make money. So
But you said it, Arnaldo, and John Bebop, he put it extremely clearly: record labels, record companies.
Yep. Well, like within Warner, Reprise that was Sinatra's label. He had total right to do whatever he wanted on that label, period, end of sentence.
Because
But
he signed
not-
a contract for
Yeah.
that.
Well, they signed a contract for him to have a label, and he set the parameters. So it kind of depends on how the label started. Zappa probably, I think was he exclusive to Discreet? It seemed like he was at least a primary one. But it depends on the origin of the subsidiary and how it comes to be, and some of those things come into play. It doesn't happen as much as it used to, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think he's trying to put out these sort of subsidiary labels where he can have some control, but I think at the end of the day, he was always felt like his hands were tied, he was handcuffed by Warner, because at the end of the day, he was always under Warner, and
Right.
eventually he got out from under that. But I think some of the like Discreet and Bizarre were sort of an effort to kind of get out from under that.
I call them vanity labels, where to make your high profile artist happy
Yeah.
and to retain them, you come into agreements where,
Shut them up.
okay, I'll let you have your own little label, but these are the parameters of what you can sign with. Like, for example, in the mid 90s, Madonna had Maverick.
Oh, yeah.
And Maverick signed one of the highest selling records of all time, Alanis Morissette.
Yeah.
Didn't she have like also like a say in Sire at one point?
I don't know if she had a stake. I know she pleaded with Seymour Stein to sign her when he was in the hospital. That I know, but I don't know what kind of. I think Sire was Maverick was underneath Sire.
Okay.
At the time, but yeah, that was a label that they gave Madonna so that she could have fun with, right? Because there's a certain point in, I think, most artists' careers where they think they can become A&R people, right? Who else has had subsidiary, like the Rolling Stones, right? Rolling Stones Records, didn't they start signing Peter Tosh and a few other reggae artists? I don't know who else was on that label.
And wasn't like Interscope at one point also kind of under artist direction?
It's possible, yeah. It's possible it was, because
I know Nine Inch Nails had like stakes in it.
nothing. Yeah, Nine Inch Nails had nothing, right? For example.
Yeah, but it reversed. Like because of the success, he actually had stakes in Interscope.
Oh, he did. Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
Well, here I want to continue this discussion, Stunty. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let's break off the podcast proper, so that Chance can get that part worked out, and then we'll go into the freestyle and let's continue the discussion, because this is great stuff. Let me just kind of draw a line in the sand here quickly. Thank you, everyone, for listening to what is this? Surface Noise at the B-side. Appreciate you guys, but if you're watching, don't go anywhere. We still got some fun stuff to go. So. Let me get the freestyle up. Boom. Back, let's do it. All right, now it's official. Okay, sorry, Stunty. What were you going to say?
No, I don't even remember. Like that.
I knew that was going to happen. I'm sorry, dude.
Like the freestyle animation, like that, like killed my brain for.
It was so good. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in it. Well, let me ask it. I think both Stunty and Arnaldo, it's like two sides of a coin, where it's kind of, and I think Stunty, you hit on it, like lesser of the evils and some of the evil things that are going on, which we're all aware of,
being
right?
a bit dramatic, yeah.
Well, no, but I mean, like, there's been really, really bad deals been signed by artists and different things, and then never being able to, with contracts and artists not making money and all this stuff. And then Arnaldo's kind of put the other spin on it, which is like, artists thinking they can be A&R people. So it's like, yeah, it might be the lesser of the evils, but in a way it's a necessary evil. It's just, why can't we come to terms that work for everyone, right?
I'll give you.
Who was the artist that signed Uncle Kracker? Who was that?
I don't know.
Was it Fred? Was it Fred
Uncle
Durst?
Cracker? That must have been. What's the
Fred
name
Durst.
Fred Durst signed them.
Yeah, it was.
Was it David Allenco?
No.
No.
I'll have to Google it. But it
Fred
was like,
Flintstone? No.
yeah, it was. I think it was Fred Durst, or maybe it was Kid Rock. One of those two. One of those two winners signed.
I'm not sure they would be happy with the mixing up.
Yeah, Vinyl Dreamscape said Kid Rock. I think it was Kid Rock who signed Uncle Kracker. So
I have an interesting example.
of they thought they were A&R people.
Preview 73 signed on Warp. This album was massively successful. That was kind of a reinvention of hip hop in the early 2000s. I became friends with him, and we had long discussions. And by his third album, he was telling me how he hated Warp, that they were taking advantage of him so much, that they were the biggest assholes, everything, blah, blah, blah. He still did 3 or 4 albums with them after it. And not because his contract obligated him to do that. It's just that sometimes the perception by the artist of like the evilness of your masters is like the grass is not always greener, at the neighbor.
Well, shall we talk about the Beastie Boys and Rick Rubin?
Yeah.
Shall we? Yeah.
Well, they don't see eye to eye on their past endeavors. Rick Rubin, did he sign them out of his college NYU dorm? I believe, right? But then he screwed them over. Then he screwed them over with royalties. So yes, there are a lot of real sad stories when it comes to the music industry, and then there are a lot of naive artists that, unfortunately, were ill-advised into some deals, or they thought, like, classic example. I remember seeing this on VH1, Behind the Music. TLC complaining that they never saw a penny because of all the expenses posted to their account. Well, that's how the record industry works. You want a number one song or number one album, you invest in videos, you invest in lavish promo appearances, and all of those things add up, right? You should have kept your advance in a bank account or have someone administer what, because you got a big advance, it doesn't mean that your account is going to recoup, right, all the expenses that are posted against it. So
and then there's also the artists that
I'm sorry?
who are, then there's also the artists who have a greater idea of themselves and their actual worth than
exactly. Yeah. Right.
Like the artists that are like a pain in the ass for the label because they had one success at one point and the artist doesn't really realize that, oh, okay.
Well,
but because now, like when you sign, when an independent artist signs with an independent label, a successful independent label, how is an independent label successful in these days? Through licensing a lot. Licensing not like of their catalog, but of the tracks for movies, commercials, web, etc. Which you could argue that, oh, it's giving wider and wider exposure for the artist who is still under development in a way. But the artist, it's difficult to see that. Like, it's easier to think, oh, I made a lot of money to that label and I'm not as rich as I think I should be. So they must be taking advantage of me. Whereas the reality is that the label alone doesn't decide the rules of the industry and how the money is shared, unfortunately.
That only works when you're Sinatra.
Yep. In the 50s.
Did any of that change? I feel like I used to hear a lot about when the hip hop era, and you mentioned Beastie Boys, Arnaldo, but like in the 90s and 2000s, it seemed like there was a lot of independent labels coming out and people having control of their music and getting more money. Has something changed in recent years like that?
I think artists are a lot smarter now.
Mm-hmm.
They know the value of their masters, of their recorded music, and a lot of newer deals they're retaining the ownership of their masters, and they themselves license it to the major label. Beyonce, she owns all her music through Parkwood. All of her records you will see licensed exclusively to Columbia, Sony, right? All of these major artists nowadays, Taylor Swift, they own their music and they operate through licensing deals.
But that's an extremely small minority.
No, there's a lot. There are a lot. Like I can tell you from my example at BMG, the majority of our signings are not typically licensed deals in the pure sense of licensing, but ownership
Oh,
reverts back.
ownership, yeah. That's
Ownership
like,
reverts back to the artist
hmm.
if the account is in a payable position after a certain number of years. If the agreement is for 7 to 10 years, and at the expiration of the term, which is of the rights period of 7 or 10 years, if the account is in good standing, that's it. Either you renegotiate the deal with the artist, or the artist can take their masters somewhere else.
Or like, for example, Oasis, you're trying to renew your hype so you can sell the rights for your whole catalog in one go for like $500 million to some lunatic who whatever. Like that's also one of the new trends for when you're on that scale. But yeah.
Another thing this is making me think of too is what about artists re-recording their music? And I know we've heard about it famously with Taylor Swift, but this has been going on for a long time on Spotify and different services, right? Where people, maybe Def Leppard was another one, where you can't even hear the original stuff in the streaming services. And I guess it's it's a double-edged sword, right? Because that, I'm guessing that's a way for the artist to get back into recouping some money for their art, but at the same time, the consumer is hearing like they can't hear the OG stuff. What do you guys know about that?
It's nothing new, actually. I mean, people just, because Taylor does it, it's, they just go crazy. But a lot of
Yeah.
like those oldies,
Elvis
50s.
did
Yeah,
it.
Elvis.
Right.
Little Richard did it, Fats Domino. Like, people just tend to forget,
Yeah, but it's
That's true.
because that of recent it's been very uncommon. Like now you named Def Leppard, an example from like 35, 40 years ago, and Taylor Swift. How many others can you name in the past like 25 years? It's like it's rare that you have a need or the power to do that. Like Taylor Swift is an extreme example. And the fact that she did it was a smart move for her, but also a move that she could afford that almost no one can afford.
It's a unique situation too. Yeah.
It also depends on, I don't know how older agreements were made with record labels, but modern day agreements have re-record clauses that before a certain number of years, the artist is forbidden from re-recording it.
That's interesting.
So that's why Taylor Swift is timing her records as they become available for her to re-record them.
Yeah, there's nothing more frustrating in the 70s, 80s, 90s to buy a compilation or a redo, and you didn't know it was not the originals, and they'd have it in really small type on the very back.
Right.
It'd say original artist, not original recording, or something like that. Ugh.
Yeah, and I know they've been doing it for a long time, and like even going back to like big band music would just get re-recorded and stuff like that, and it's almost unusual to find like originals of some of that stuff. But it seems like when it started happening in rock and roll, I mean, bands like Def Leppard and now with there are others, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I know there's been other bands where I'll hear it, and if you have a good ear for this stuff because you've been listening to it for 30 years, you're like, nah, this is not the original. So anyway, seemed like a related topic.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, Russell says
a lot of times, let's debunk another myth where and I'm not here to play the advocate of the label, but there are times when the artists complain and do those PR campaigns. Well, the label won't give me back my masters. Well, maybe your account is so heavily unrecouped that the label would have to write it off. Many times artists have been allowed to buy back their catalog. Just pony up the outstanding balance and you can get it back, right? I think, who did that recently? Forgot who it was.
Why would that happen to Taylor Swift? I don't know the whole story. Do you guys know the details? Like, why couldn't she just pony up whatever money and buy her masters?
I think that was the case. She wanted to, but I forgot what happened.
No, it's just that the label didn't like. Therefore, they were seeing her exploding and like, no, we're not giving you that away. And she just found like in the fine print. Like,
but there was
a
changeover of her master from Scooter Braun to to another label that bought it out Scooter Braun, and I think Taylor put in an offer, and I don't know what happened, that Scooter Braun did not want to sell to her but sold. I don't know if it was because it was a higher bidder or what, or if it was a personal issue, but
I think actually it was a little bit them being like surprised that she was making that move, and they were like kind of like, oh, like they realized, oh, she helped them realize, she put herself in that position.
The value of it.
A little bit.
but she got the last laugh in the end.
Is it a
And never
cackling
tell
laugh?
Michael Jackson he should get into publishing.
What's that?
And never tell Michael Jackson he should get into publishing.
No. But that is not to say, I'm sure. So everyone talks about the Beatles, right? How they got screwed over at the beginning of their career.
Right.
I am sure they had opportunity to renegotiate their contracts whenever they started hitting it big. And every year since they disbanded, I'm sure they've negotiated writer shares. Actually, there was, I don't know if it's true, but at one point, typically the master royalties, in the case of the Beatles, they get split 4 ways, right? 25% to each. There was a rumor that Paul McCartney had negotiated in the 70s a higher share from Capitol or EMI versus the other 3, because
From Ringo.
he felt that he was keeping up the name of the Beatles with his solo activity.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know if there's truth to that. But yeah, there was a rumor going around that one artist was being paid a greater share than the others. It could have been on the label side, like out of pocket of the label, where it seemed like everyone was getting 25% each, but the label was like Capitol or EMI was chipping in an extra to Paul McCartney for keeping up, the name of the Beatles during the 70s. While
Yikes. No wonder people say Paul's dead. Anyway.
You're dead to me, Paul.
It was Ringo's wish.
I heard a thing where I said this before, but I heard Paul say it. I think it was on Howard Stern or something, where he said Ringo has more hits or has gotten more awards or whatever it was than like any of the Beatles. And I was like, really?
I think didn't he have more top 10 or more number ones?
Maybe that was it. Yeah, something like that. I was surprised.
The beginning of their solo career.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the grand scheme of things, that means nothing, because
No, of course not.
it's just the technicality of the way the Billboard works.
Oh,
and
let's not even get into the chart game. The charts are awful. They're all rigged.
They're off the charts.
They're rigged.
Pay to
Like,
win.
if you want to have a number 1 hit, just release a record in August, and you're good.
Little
I haven't
competition.
heard that one. Do you guys? One of the things I mentioned too, and I don't want to cut this short or anything, but I want to make sure if you guys wanted to show any records that maybe had unusual labels or interesting lababels or anything like that.
I
don't know if you
can
guys
play your game of like just the tip. I can do it reverse by showing. I will do it that way. So, Atlantic.
Oh,
So
then we have to guess it.
Who is the artist?
You'll have to.
Are
Can
you
you make
pick-
Stunty bigger? You'll have to make him bigger.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, thank you. Oh, that
That's-
was sorry.
Go!
Wrong guy.
Stunty.
Wrong guy. There we go. KSR Atlantic.
The hell's KSR?
It's one of the most successful Atlantic release of recent.
It's not
Recent.
Coltrane.
What?
Or is it Coltrane?
Yes, almost.
Oh, okay. Almost.
Wow, is that signed by Cardi B?
Yeah.
Oh
Whoa.
my!
All right.
Did you meet her to get it signed, or did you buy?
No.
I was gonna say.
You bought a signed
I
copy.
wish I did.
Signed probably by the assistant or by the intern at the label.
Don't crush my dreams, Arnaldo.
Oh
The
man.
salesman side.
The knife. Are you gonna have that authenticated, Stunty?
You know that really happens, right?
Yeah. I've most of the records signed in the world are signed by me. Actually, it's. I mean, like, how easy is it to scam people with these signed things? I mean, it's.
Oh yeah.
Well, there's a company that actually don't they certify? I forgot what the name of the company is that can certify the authenticity of an autograph.
I'm sure someone invented a business around that.
Yeah, there
And
is. There is.
Yeah,
Actually.
yeah.
I forgot the name of it. Is it gold? Not gold mine.
Inspirational business, huh?
A slab it. Yeah.
Well, like one of the, I mean, I can't remember the big, is it CGC or I forget who the big comic book creator is, but I'm pretty sure
CGC.
they've moved to not even authenticating signatures unless they witness it, just
Yeah.
because there's just too many fakes out there.
Yeah, you just need to have. If you don't have Alzheimer or an alcohol problem, like, come on, it's not.
Well, there was that guy that
I'm
got
sure-
busted.
I'm
Doing
sure
that
AI will work wonders for.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, imagine Arnaldo is on his deathbed, and you know that giving him a Morrissey album signed by Morrissey would give him comfort. Morrissey's been dead for a long time, but like, come on, like, wouldn't you do it?
You have a signed Morrissey, don't you, Arnaldo?
I have a DVD and a book. I have yet to get him to sign an album.
You had him sign them too?
Life goals.
The DVD, yes. The book I purchased.
Where did you meet him?
The Virgin Megastore in New York.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How was he? Did he look up at you or just?
Well, twice. The first time I actually was working at the Virgin Megastore, the one in Times Square, and he was just casually shopping.
Oh, whoa.
And I had like a 10-minute conversation with him. No one well, yeah, a few of the employees recognized him. But yeah, it wasn't like people were like crowding around him while he was shopping. And then that was probably the more interaction I had, because at a signing you never really get to interact with the artist, especially because the bodyguards were checking everyone for additional either booklets or records, because he was only there to sign the DVD.
Mm-hmm.
They were opening up because the Digipack DVDs that they used to have, right? The one that were all cardboard,
Mm-hmm.
without the jewel box case, and they were opening them up because some fans were very slick. They were putting in CD booklets in there, so that when Morrissey opened it here, that the CD booklet would be there, and he could not say no to sign it, right? So after that, they were opening everyone's DVD to make sure that was the only thing that was being signed.
Oh,
I was about to say, ironically, riveting, and then you actually got riveting.
And there was one guy that I don't know, because he came out of the store while I was still in line, and he was lifting up his shirt. He had Morrissey sign the side of his torso, and he was going down to get it tattooed on himself.
Wow.
Oh, really? Okay. I was going to say that's so temporary, but not if you tattoo it.
No, he was running down to the village to get it signed.
Well, it's usually you have this dumb idea. Oh, let him sign my body, and then you realize, shit, this is not gonna last. What can I do now?
Yeah.
No, he had a plan. He had a plan.
That's fun. I don't know. Is that toxic? I mean, if you're going right over the marker, oh god.
Contrary to Arnaldo, I have my favorite artist ever. I have his first album signed by him to me. Nurse with
Hold on,
Wound.
let me blow you
Let's
up.
see who he is. Nurse with.
Oh, jeez.
Who is that?
That's my favorite band. I have like 68 albums by him,
Wow.
plus
Dang.
probably as many singles.
Okay, maybe we could start right there. Having the name along with the signature.
Yeah.
Is that
Having it personalized.
evaluating the record in terms of, the signature because it's personal to you, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
Or is it actually enhancing it because if you had bad intention of forging someone's signature to resell the copy, why would you put your name on it, right?
Maybe you're smart and thinking of all these.
Right?
Hey,
You're thinking
well-
it both ways. No one's going
Right.
to really think that it's not authentic because it has my name on it, right?
Well, now they're going to. You've you put it out there now. Arnaldo's going to go back to his Morrissey. To Arnaldo, my good
You know that-
friend.
It does say to Arnaldo because he was personal.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But you know that technically, from a record collector's perspective, even if it's an authentic signature, it downgrades the record.
Well, just like more.
Well, it's
so
like it
than
means
when
more
you-
to you, but it's going to mean
You mean
less
it
to the next
downgrades the
person.
value of it? What do you mean, the record?
Yeah. The value.
The value.
Yeah. From the gold mine standard, like
Really?
because as we established, it's so easy to forge a signature. So they decided, like, if you want to add value to it, it's your business. But in reality, it's like a near mint record would be VG plus if it's signed.
So basically, whether you sign your name on your record
Mm.
or on your Beatles record, you sign Stunty on it.
Yeah.
Or you have Paul McCartney's signature on it.
Mm.
From a gold mine standard,
Yeah.
they're both equally the same value.
Devalue.
They're both equally damaging the record in the same
Okay.
way. Yeah.
It's not that
No, but-
your signature damages it more than Paul McCartney's.
It's just that, like, obviously, if it's a Paul McCartney one, then the condition of the record is not really that relevant.
Relevant. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
It's a different, section
Product.
of
Yeah.
market that would look for it.
Stunty, you even said it. You don't play the record jacket.
It's true.
Yeah, no, but you know that, like, the grading of the jacket impacts the value, the money that you pay for the record. If it's a
Of course, yeah. Of course.
and
For the fanatics of the fetish of collecting the object, yes, I totally
And
agree.
the
And
butcher
I
cover is the greatest example of that.
Oh, yeah.
and I think I just introduced Arnaldo to a new trick in the great complainer in chief arsenal of, like, how can I get something back from the label?
Which is
Well, you have
this.
you have a way of finding a way to tell the record label or the seller that no, there was this little bit of this thing that doesn't that is an issue.
No, I'm sorry. I'm missing it. Say that again.
How can I explain that to Jason? Help me out.
Just say it. Say it outright.
Say it, just say
I'm not
it.
I'm not
Do
following either.
Arnaldo is the complainer in chief when it comes to condition.
Oh yeah. No,
Oh.
I mean, I don't think
There you
I'm.
go.
I don't think I am a chief complainer.
He holds them accountable.
David, just imagine you're starting a new label, and suddenly you see that you have Arnaldo as a customer. Are you happy or are you shaking?
He's my beta tester. He's my QC guy.
I mean, I see your point. It's like, especially when you're buying expensive records. Like, I know Concert Buddy, I always tease him because of the seam splits, right? It had a seam split, I returned it. Some of us aren't, like, I'm probably not as aware of that as he is, but at the same time, it's like you want to be able to maintain your value, right? Because when you go to resell that, they're going to be like, "Oh, this has a seam split." And if you had a way to return that in advance, now you're screwing yourself.
But on a
I get
MoFi,
it. I get it from that standpoint.
it's not a defect on a MoFi. That's a feature.
You know, it's funny. I'm doing a video about that. Like, when we talk about, like, David was talking earlier about this, or the audiophile labels, like labels that define themselves as audiophile before the record is even produced. which is like the greatest scam of them all, because the audiophile culture is you check out records that are already released and you gauge them with your sound system. This is up to the audiophile standards of this system. When you see these UHQRs that had so many returns because of defects, how can that be an audiophile? How can you decide that you're an audiophile record before the record is even pressed? That makes no sense. So therefore, in my world, and you're welcome to debate it and to disagree with me, but calling a label, whatever, a reissue label, like defining yourself as audiophile is a scam, because it doesn't work with the audiophile culture. It goes against the whole idea of audiophilia.
Well, if you take that to its logical end, then I guess everything must be digital then, because everything in vinyl audiophile is going to have some noise with it. So
No,
it's not called perfection.
No, but like when a record has issues that are so bad that you have to return the record when it's brand new, how could it be? How could you decide that you are an audiophile label when you're manufacturing faulty records in numbers? And I'm not saying like the odd one, and they're like, of course, there will be some records every now and then, but when it comes in these numbers, and it's not like
I don't know where you get these numbers from, because you know, here's the reality of the matter: people who have a problem. Pardon me.
From the vinyl community, so you might be right.
But here's the problem: but that's like going to a group of complainers and taking a survey.
Exactly.
You can't do that. That's not a sampling. That's a focus group, and they're focused on problems. So, you know, I'm just
you're going to hear from the people that have the problems, right?
Right. You don't hear from the people who have no problem, because they're satisfied and they're quiet. You know.
Well, and to your point too, Stunty, is I've gotten records where there was an obvious, visible defect. To me, it's like that. How? Like a label that's not centered, or a defect in the actual vinyl, or things like that. Things that can be observed before they even get put in the mail. That's one thing. But I think it's got to be tougher though, right? It's not like they're listening to every piece of vinyl before it goes out. But I think it's the visible stuff that gets me. It's like, I can see it right there. There's a defect, you know what I mean, on the vinyl stuff. I mean, it's going to happen. I guess it's annoying if it happens to you multiple times, and the more it happens to you, and like Chance is a good example. He's buying a lot of these new records, and so he's more apt to get some of this stuff.
But I guess we can all agree that, like, okay, you see a visual defect, it's annoying. Does the record play fine? Yes.
Right.
Should I really be complaining? Like, because we know, like you said something interesting, like often we hear off-centered. How often does that happen nowadays with new records? Never.
Very rare. Very rare.
And when it happens, it means that it's being pressed at an old pressing plant that has old machines where they actually have to drill the hole in the stamper themselves. Nowadays, like all new machines, that doesn't exist. This is already done at plattering. This cannot happen mechanically.
Okay.
It's just impossible.
Yeah, and I could tell you, finding like a visual on Clarity vinyl is very hard. The way it looks, it's like cream. It's just colored vinyl's the same way. Black is really the easiest, at least for me, to see a defect. So like Clarity vinyl is not easy to see a defect in, to be honest with you.
That's a good point too. Yep.
Good or bad, right or wrong
on that topic.
Yeah.
When it comes to off center, it still happens. I've gotten off center from Chad, from Acoustic Sound.
Oh, you mean the label or the hole?
When you see.
Oh, and you know why? Because
when you see the needle or the cartridge
100%
moving left to right.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And that tells you, and you know what that tells you? That Chad is using machines from the past where you need to still do these things. And when he's highlighting all the special features of his records, comparing it to other pressing plants, he's comparing them to older pressing plants that don't exist anymore.
Even the new ones.
No, that's impossible.
That's one. No, it's not.
I can
possible.
tell you from a mechanic
I sp-
standpoint,
I,
it's
I've,
impossible.
I've spoken with one of the senior people on our supply chain team who used to manage a pressing plant in New Jersey. Forgot the name of it. And I actually brought that up. And he said, yes, it's not uncommon because after a certain amount of time of pressings, you have to check that everything is still screwed in properly. And even today, which I'm assuming he's operating with new machines, not
No, you're wrong. Wrong assumption.
well. He was
It's
saying
not
it still happens
possible.
today
Arnaldo,
because they become loose and they have to be tightened, and it's very common that it can happen.
Arnaldo, I'll just tell you why this is 100% impossible. How do you think the hole is being made in the record these days?
I don't know.
So basically, in the heart of the machine, so basically the stampers are screwed on both molds.
Correct.
And they
Top
have,
and bottom.
and there's a hole in the screw. And when the record is, when the PVC is being pressed together,
Mhm.
then from the machine up there, there's this
Rod.
rod that gets into 3 different holes. So if it wasn't centered, it would destroy the whole
I wish he
machine.
was on the stream and he could probably explain it technically how it happens.
Well, I'm explaining to you
Right.
how it's not possible mechanically, because if nowadays with the new machines,
But
If-
that's the difference. He's not you. New machines are like what
gotten
Paramount
off-center
Pressing
rec-
had.
I've gotten off-center records.
Yeah.
From GZ.
and that means that that record was not pressed with a new machine.
You mean one with a PLC and using newer technology, right?
Right. I'm assuming GZ has all brand new machines.
If you got a
not
record from
machines
DZ
from, like-
that is off center, that is the proof that they're also using older machines.
I don't know.
I can, like, I'll give you an example about, like, okay, all these big plants, like, so how many machines do you think Optimal has?
10.
No, they have more, but and GZ, they have a lot. So when I started the record plant from one of the 2 manufacturers of the new machines, we had the serial number on the machines, number 41 and number 43, the 2 first machines we bought. 2 years later, I did some consulting for a new record pressing plant in Belgium, and I was there when they received their first new machine. And the serial number on that one was 96, which means that in the lapse of 2 years, the company, which is the leading company, the biggest company in the world for manufacturing new machines, had only managed to manufacture like about 55 new machines. So that tells you how long time it will take before the whole, like, I don't know the word in English, cheptel, like the herd of machines around the world allocated between different record plants, how long it will take. Because also within these 2 years, they had quadrupled the numbers of employees as well so it's not surprising to me that GZ, with like probably a capacity of 80, 90 machines, that they don't have it all new standard machines. And that is like the empirical observations I've made from directly. So if there is another explanation how that happened, there's maybe other paradigms, but like the most likely explanation and the only one possible is that it's not one of the 2 new models of new machines.
I don't know.
I didn't mean to bring up a topic that would get be so controversial.
I know for sure that this is a record plant that is only 10 years old.
Yeah.
So you do the math. I don't know if they started off with older machines or new machines.
Well, the math is also that if you buy an older machine, it costs you like 4 times less than the new machines, because these new machines are expensive. So if you're starting a new record plant, if you're on a budget, and if you have space, also, if you're, for example, in the US, it can make sense to buy older machines if you have access to them and they are in good functional condition, because then you can actually go into production quite fast. With the new machines, it takes a little while to learn them and to do them properly, because there's basically only one instructor in the whole world for them, and he works in Sweden or in Canada.
Right, Canada, yeah.
And to your earlier point too, Stunty, is that like if it's cosmetic, everyone's going to be different, right? But for me, if it's cosmetic, it's not as big of a deal. Even if it's a defect on the record and it's not audible, but I have had records where you take them right out of the shrink and there's a visible defect and it's audible. That's to me where it's like, oh man, I mean,
Yeah, then you have all rights to complain.
and it's black wax. It's not, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's not even clear or
The
whatever.
thing is that, just think about it. Like, for example, Jose, who has his label, he presses 300 copies or 500 copies, and you get a record from his label, and there's a defect, and you complain to him. He's not responsible for that problem. He's not the one who caused it. Like, if you decide to take him accountable for it, that's your prerogative. And if he decides to agree that he's responsible for it, that's his prerogative as well. I think, because as you said, like, it's, as David was saying, like, if you want a perfect record, go digital, in a way. So sometimes you're unlucky, and if you really want the physical format of that, sometimes the perfect version of it or the most perfect vinyl doesn't exist. And if you're not happy with that, well, there's not necessarily a solution for that. But it's also from a moral standpoint. Like, if you're complaining about the condition of a pressing to a small indie label that had nothing to do with the defect that was on the record, it's probably not the same as if you're complaining to Rhino or to BMG if you got a faulty record, which is still, in the end, not necessarily their fault. It's like the defect happens either during the cutting or the pressing or the condition, if it's a scratch, then it's probably distribution.
Yeah.
Well, one thing for sure, as I noticed when I go to the plants, people, the only time the record is always checked in any way, I guess 2 times. It comes off the press. Usually the person who puts it on there usually flips it over and just takes a quick look. But then when they package it, right, that's when. But after a while of doing that process, you get a little complacent, I think, too, in that, just from an operational standpoint. So really, if there was a way to have a camera scan or something to look for a defect, that would be a much more objective, pure way to do it if that technology existed.
Yeah.
Right.
Because,
yeah, and I mean, I get it. It's like stuff happens, right? There's nothing that's perfect. And especially we're talking about analog products and everything. So it's not me complaining per se. I guess I was responding to the initial comment about Arnaldo. I'm defending in a way, like, this stuff happens. And because there's a resale value to it, you want to make sure that what you're getting is clean. But it happens, right? And David, I think you're right. And I've thought about this many times when I hear complaints about, this pressing plant sucks. Now we're talking about people, right? Just human beings that have all the same stuff that we go through when we're at work, right? It's not like they're robots. These are people observing it. Someone had a bad day. Someone was distracted. Someone didn't get enough sleep or whatever. And that stuff gets through. I mean, it's just human error.
Well, people say, I don't want the record, that was done by, the 900 stamp or what, what I mean of that.
Right.
And I'm thinking, I don't want the record that got checked by somebody in the last half hour of work on a Friday.
right.
On a Friday.
Well, let's put it this way. Okay. I do complain, right?
That's where we started. Okay. Yeah.
That's why he had to step away so he could have a moment to just.
But I am more tolerant of a lot of things. I know that's not perfect. Like David said, it's not a perfect medium. But there are labels that are or pressing plants that are consistently good. We're talking about 90% of the times I have no problem. And then there's the total opposite. Now, I really want to challenge all four of you to tell me that where Third Man falls in these two extremes. Apart from the Jack White records that are impeccable, the last one, I had no problem. I almost can say it's a perfect record in terms of pressing quality. To some of those Verve by request, the 2 or 3 titles I bought, I had to, it was either warped or really bad surface noise, like poor quality vinyl. You could hear even after cleaning. So
Do they
And
do
you're
the
right, and
cutting?
there are notorious records or whole series. You know, if you're in the jazz world, the 75th anniversary Blue Notes are that thing. People hate them because so many of them came out with issues, surface noise, and stuff like that. So, to your point, yeah, famously there are records that are just poor pressings.
Rainbow
But you
went
say
out of business
pressing.
because of that Beatles box set.
Yep.
It was terrible.
You realize though that when you say poor pressing, and you say background noise, constant background noise is most likely coming from the cutting.
No, because then I've gotten a replacement copy and it was much quieter. And
That can happen. But
you
like,
right.
if you have a whole batch of records where you have background noise, like the pressing basically, yeah, it's still a little bit weird. I know it can happen, but it's still like statistically, like when you press a record, you press what is on the stamper. You can't really, the defects you can add.
So you don't
is-
think that the quality of the vinyl that you're using can produce some kind of surface noise?
If you do a splatter or mixed colors, yes. If you do a united color, like a one color, not really. It's like there's like it. You would have had like an issue with the heating and cooling system during the pressing phase, but like notice that like and there's no like why would you put these records out? And even though like it's very rare and difficult to do to press a record and to have it not look good, that is easy to make these mistakes, and you see
when I hear people complaining of the usually white or the light colors, sometimes there's a residue of what was happening on that press before, and there's like a little speck of black somewhere on your pure white.
The little speck of white of black is easy. So basically, when you do one color and then you change the color, there's
that's what I said.
Yeah,
that's what I said. I'm not that type of complainer. It is what it is. If the color's not perfect, I understand the why that happens.
This sounds like a gold record.
Usually, but when every time you finish with an order and you have to press the next one and it's a different color, you have to purge the machine so you get the perfect other color. But every time I have to do that, of course I do myself a special unreleased variant color of like a mixed and I have these editions of records that are not supposed to exist and that I keep for myself, and maybe in 20-30 years maybe then I will like Jason, do you have that variant? Huh? Jason.
One for me too, just quickly, because on Arnaldo's notice, you mentioned Third Man. I wasn't going to bring it up, but I did a review on this record. Oh, sorry. Hang on.
Now we can read.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Whoa.
See all my camera
You're way too sophisticated. My goodness.
I know. Okay. So this record just came out. I got it the day it came out. I wanted to rush and I wanted to do a video on it. It was like early in my YouTube career. I'm like, I'm going to be the first guy to do a review on this record. I spun it and it sounds fantastic. It was really good. I made
needed
my
to
video.
copy that.
Yeah, man, go out and buy The Awakening, Ahmad Jamal Trio. This thing's fantastic. And I got slammed because people were like, my copy sucks. And when I did my my review, there wasn't even any Discogs reviews yet. So I run off to Discogs and sure enough, you had a wide variety of people. This is fantastic. Like the acoustics are great. No surface noise. You know, it's quiet, blah, blah. And then you'd get the exact opposite. This is garbage. So I don't know how many records they put out on that first day, but we're talking about like a very first pressing of this, right? The day it
Multiple
was
plants.
issued.
Do you know if it was different plants or?
Well, Third Man, I don't know. I don't know if it's,
Oh, it was
I don't
just
know how
Third
that,
Man? Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And I sent them an email. And of course I wasn't expecting much, but I figured I'd say like, you know, there's a lot of people complaining. I made a video. Mine sounds great. Right? What's that?
They have 2 pressing plants, one in Nashville and one in Detroit, right?
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's it. I don't know.
It could be that.
Check the dead wax.
There's one thing that people don't necessarily talk about that can happen during the pressing phase that could actually impact the quality of the sound and the pressing. It's generally with a stamper in modern days, like since like the mid 90s, you make between 1,000 and 1,500 copies with one stamper. What happens after that is that usually the center, the ring that holds the stamper on the mold, like
Where's
the outer ring starts to detach, which means that the screw doesn't attach the stamper at all, which means that there could be some vacuum coming under, and also some
movement.
Some movement,
Yeah.
and it will definitely impact like the cooling time and all these things. So basically, if you're cheap and you think, oh, I'll press like 2,000 with it, there's a good chance that, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happened more often than I would want or believe it does.
But aren't you supposed to max out at 1,000 and then switch the stamper?
That's what you're supposed to be.
That's what you're
Supposed to do.
Because
But
statistically, around 1,000 records, that's when the outer ring starts to be cut, detached from the actual stamper. Sometimes it lasts longer. Sometimes you're lucky and it could last for 2,000. And until this starts to deteriorate, there's no reason to change, because like the actual people who say that the stamper, the groove will be worn out, it's not possible. It's not true, because it's just plastic. There's never any friction with anything but molded plastic.
I see John Bandy. I understand what John's saying. It depends on what one is comparing the reissue to. That's an issue. Folks many times have no reference what exactly they mean by great sounding. Having said that, I think all of us here can hear a record and know, like, this is a good sounding record, this is a bad sounding record. Now, the nuances of pressing and this to sound as great as the original, yeah, if you're not A/B testing it, but at the same time, most of us can hear a record and say, okay, this sounds dynamically good. I could, all the instruments are coming through, the vocals, you know what I mean? Like, we know what a good record sounds like because we've heard enough of them, and we know what a bad record sounds like. But I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that could be a factor. But yeah,
But
I think most of us could cold listen to something and say, like, is this good or bad?
Yeah, well, it could also be, of course, the recording, the mics that were used, the mixing that was done. I mean, a lot of things. It isn't always the media, obviously, is it's a contributor, but not to the core of what was recorded.
Yeah, very true too. Yeah. Just want to see how long we can be silent.
Me too.
No, and speaking of, I don't know how Stunty is not ready for bed or tired. He's actually
ready to wake up, I think, right? What time is it over there?
Yeah, it's like 6 a.m. there, right?
5
a.m. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's like watching the Trump debate has kind of completely reshaped my sleeping schedule. So it's
Well,
only 2 days ago. So I'm still on that.
Who was it? Or you can do like was it Leonardo or was it Michelangelo? I forgot who it was. I think it was Leonardo who slept, I think, was it 20 minutes every 4 hours or something like that?
Actually, I do that.
Because I think he was studying the pattern of what the natural sleep pattern in the mother's womb. The baby doesn't go to sleep for 8 hours
No.
and then suddenly wake up. They go from 20 minutes to 40. It alternates. That's why it's so hard to get a baby into a
To go to sleep. Yeah, they're not used to our pattern. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that is actually the most natural way to sleep, is to sleep in spurts every 4 hours. I forgot what how it adds
But
up
you
to.
know who else does that? It's Joe Biden, but I'm sure David would argue for a different reason.
That's pretty good, Stoney. I'll give you that one.
Oh man.
Pretty
But
good.
yeah, I actually wonder if you can enjoy 20 minutes of sleep every 4 hours.
5 minutes of sleep every other hours is
I'm
wonderful.
not a person who can sleep on command.
Oh, I just need to listen to Elton John. That's
Funeral for a friend. There you go.
I always have the weirdest dreams when I try to nap. For some reason, they're like super intense, man. It's like not like sleeping at night. If I take a nap during the day, it's weird. Like I'm waking up in a different world, and I've like had these really intense dreams. I don't know if you guys.
I think it has to do with the REM cycle.
Yeah, when it hits.
That you are actively dreaming at the very beginning when you first fall asleep. Then I think you stop, and then you start dreaming again. That's why typically that all depends on when you wake up. Sometimes you wake up suddenly that you had just finished dreaming, and usually you wake up and then you turn around and it's like, oh my God, it felt like I was sleeping forever, and you were only sleeping for a half hour or an hour.
Got you. Yep, that makes sense.
But sleep is interesting in terms of listening to music as well, because sleep deprivation, like when you wake up too early and you feel like you have zero balance, like you feel a little bit drunk and you can't walk straight, because the balance is in your ear. So when you induce like sleep deprivation and you listen to music that you are very familiar with, like you could hum it in your head, often what you hear, it doesn't match what is on the record. You hear something different because your ear, your balance is fucked up, and you perceive the sound in a different way. And it's quite an interesting experience to do sometimes, just to see how much time before you can manage to make reality match what is on the
record. We're not laughing for you. It's the comment.
I know. I didn't want to put it up, man.
You should put it up. You should put it up.
Okay.
And on that topic of sleeping, I think I'm going to leave you guys.
Oh, yeah, I think.
Come on.
I don't know. I'm thinking we could wrap this up anyway, Arnaldo.
Yeah.
Last thing I do want to say, I know there's a little bit of a debate. I know John and Patrick. Trust me, I get it. I know that there's going to be stuff that certain people are going to have different opinions, and there's many different opinions as there are ears in the world. I guess the only point I'm trying to make is that I don't have a point to make. You guys are absolutely right, 100%. All right. All right. Well, let's everyone go to sleep, man. I appreciate everybody for hanging out tonight, and our special guest Stunty. Thanks so much for contributing and hanging out with us, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Stunty.
But as always, I've Arnaldo, Jason, David, thank you guys for being here. This was the B-side. That's why you're seeing me. You don't see Chance, but Chance will be here next Thursday. Don't worry. And yeah, we'll just end it at that, man. Thanks everybody for hanging out.
Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. See y'all.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
See you guys next time.